Today we're doing an interview with Joe Cardella, artist, sculptor, and publisher. He was the eventual founder of Artlife, and that's what we're here to talk about today. Joe, why don't you fill us in about the origins of Artlife?
Artlife was started in December of 1981 in Santa Barbara, California, after I had been forced by one circumstance or another, dealing with the redevelopment or the city, to have to move large-scale sculpture studios from one location to another. And so after the third enforced move, which was not of my own volition, I swore that I would never do anything again that I could not fit through a mail slot, after having to move very heavy concrete sculptures and things of that nature. So for a month I sat and thought of a new idea, something that would enable me to exchange ideas with other creative people that didn't involve trucks and concrete and heavy equipment. So originally, Artlife was conceived as being a live performance theater with the regular performances primarily in the artistic mode, following the origins of the Fluxus movement, which I had been a part of in New York before coming to California.
Was that in the 70s?
Yes, that was in the early 70s in Soho in New York City. And at the time it was the most avant-garde art movement that was happening.
Yes, wasn't Yoko Ono part of that movement?
Yes, she was for many years, and was a very important artist in that movement. Also Joseph Beuys in Germany, and Nam June Paik from Korea, all of whom became giants in the art world in the following years. However, I was only peripherally involved for a year or two before coming to California, but it had a very big influence on my thinking. So originally, the concept of Artlife was to be live theater. However, it was not reasonable to be able to do what I wanted to do by using large space. So I reasoned that it would make much more sense to be able to do it on a small scale through the mail.
Did you have a formula?
Well, I developed one along the way, and so that I could engage my concept and get it to other people, I decided to do everything through the mail rather than to try to have physical spaces and move people and spaces in and out with trucks and equipment and everything else. The whole concept of going through the mail was pivotal in allowing me to be able to do this. And so I conceived a formula which equated art and life. And the formula simply read, art is to life as life is to art. Art equals life, life equals art.
It's fabulous.
So in the letter of introduction for the first issue in January of 1981, I outlined this concept with the formula, saying that each is the other and both are one and the same, referring to art and life. So that was the formula that I based the entire 25-year piece on, and still holds to this day. And so that pretty much was the seminal moment when I came up with a formula and deciding to exchange ideas with other creative people through the mails on a monthly basis.
Well, that's really interesting because the international mail art movement, that was only going on in Europe, wasn't it?
No, actually it involved quite a number of countries all around the globe.
Oh, okay.
However, it was made up of individual artists sending individual pieces of work on a small scale to each other individually. So the mail art movement was all done by individuals, and it was never commercial. It was never anything that was bought or sold. It was something that was exchanged freely among artists on a global scale. And there was never any editing involved in mail art. And it was very democratic and international and wonderful. It still goes on today. And I think there are probably a couple hundred countries involved nowadays.
Can you explain to the viewers exactly what was contained in each issue?
Well, starting with the very first issue, I always wanted to have some visual art and something that was written as well as far as original writing goes, which would normally take the form of poetry, which for the most part had never been published before.
And you did this all on your own?
For 29 days a month, I did it with a telephone and a Rolodex. And for the first few years, every month I made 30 or 40 phone calls specifically to different artists asking them to do pages for the next issue. And on the last day of the month, some volunteers would come over and we would physically collate the pages that were sent that month. So it would be, depending on the year or the time or the number of the edition, it would be 4 or 6 other artists and poets and myself. And on a Saturday afternoon, we would actually assemble the issue for the month.
So what you're saying, there's actually original artwork in each book?
Yes, that's correct. The way the publication worked is that artists from around the world were invited to send an edition of original prints, whether they be screen prints, assemblages, collages, drawings, anything, any mutation of any of those things, anything that I could fit into the binding, essentially, including any conceivable object which could be added to a page. And these editions were signed and numbered by the artists and came from Germany, Spain, Italy, all the United States, Japan, South America, wherever. And they came on a monthly basis. And as long as they met the size requirement, which was the only thing that was not flexible, was the size of the binding. And even for European artists, that was a bit of a challenge because their paper was, their standard size was slightly narrower and slightly taller than ours. So those all had to be cut down either on that end or this end to fit. But after a number of years, that was remedied. So that wasn't really even a problem then. But people would always send work, and I would always encourage any artist to send a proof before a final edition if they were going to either spend a lot of time on the edition or a lot of money doing it. They were encouraged to send the proof first so that if it were returned, they would only get 1 back instead of 100 or 200 back. And so the proof process worked pretty well as far as the editing goes. And the deadline was the 15th of every month for 25 years. That never changed. And that deadline was published in every issue for 25 years. So that deadline was in 275 different issues. So that it was a constant that artists around the world were aware of. And I always would tell people that they could never be late for an issue, only early for the next one. So if something came in after the 15th of the month, it was just held for the next month.
That's a brilliant concept. How did it go over in New York, in the New York art scene at the time?
Well, for the first 3 years, I kept it local in Santa Barbara and California until I got all of the bugs worked out of it, until it was actually something that was very fluid and very reliable and dependable. And then after the 3rd anniversary, I took it to New York personally and had a week of appointments with all the major bookstores and museums in New York.